Hello again. It's another episode of Write Once, Read Many. This time we're covering chapters 19.1 and 19.2. Just grabbing the stream link. Okay. Hey, Vale. Hi, Greg. All right. So the audience participation question for this week, as the reminder, is what is a super useful power that you would hate to have? Vale says, got my audience participation done just in time for stream. Well, there you go. Yes, that's all I've got for that as the question, which is on the Discord. And for themes, I thought that, I don't know if this counts as a theme because it's like a thing Wildbow is doing, but the level of seeding he's doing between the dream, like just the way that the dream works, and then between the like Scapegoat's power of like having the parallel universe, like it's giving you so much powers lore or whatever, but not in a direct way. It's all like indirect. I don't know. I think it's super good. But I will talk about those in the powers, knowledge, and world building section. Other themes, depression. I don't know, just Taylor's having a bad time. And assumedly, everyone who got absorbed is having a similarly bad time. Vale did extra credit. Oh man, I too hope you get good marks, but we'll see once we read the answers. All right, so yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a good. I didn't actually write anything down for themes because I couldn't think of anything, so I was just spitballing. 19.1 begins our new arc in a I think you can pick up pretty quickly that it's like a weird dream, but in a crazy powers fueled dream that Taylor is having while she has been absorbed by Noelle. And Taylor's pretty much powerless. She has no like physical strength. She's easily injured. Things keep happening to stop her from even like standing up or getting her feet under her. The bully trio are there. You know, it's a whole thing. And then there's a page break, and she breaks out of it, and she can see through all her bugs and feel through them. And so even though she's not able to like control them or like fight, she's still able to like use the power that she's mastered recently to like continue sensing through them. Not that she couldn't do that previously, but it feels connected that she's been getting like extra swole at bug sight and bug hearing. However much the term swole applies to a non-muscular thing, but I think y'all get what I'm saying. Anyway, so in seeing the real world, she's still stuck in the dream, but she has like two perceptions. One where Tattletale is jumping around and Noelle's trying to attack her, and then she sees she sees how like Noelle is fighting, but this place was literally built with her in mind. And Tattletale is using her ever-present gun to kill a Gru clone. But then we're back in the dream. And I'm going to kind of skip through the dreams a lot because I have the whole big section where I talk about the entire dream in the last portion. But anyway, so back in the dream, and the structure of it is like on the upper side of the page break, it'll be like normal text, and this is the in-dream thing, and then it'll have like a dash, like a sentence is being cut off. Then all italicized text for the things she can see but not affect in the bug world, which is the real world. And then back in her dream, it'll just have a dash coming right back in, and the sentence will continue. Although sometimes it feels like one of those stories where somebody new writes each line and a paper is handed around or whatever, where it feels really disjointed. Once it comes back in from a page break, it always feels like it takes kind of a swerve from where it was going before. And then, in the dream, she's just getting battered. She's still in the school hallway. And then, she's sort of, senses the bugs again. And in this sensing, she sees Tattletale pulling the pin on a grenade. And, Tattletale's awesome. So even though you shouldn't cook grenades, as it says here, she's doing it anyway. And I mean, like, you could see this as reckless, but I just think Tattletale is, like, cool-coded. She has to do things that are badass. 2 + 4 × 5 is driving, as is the tradition. So anyway, but yeah, the line is, this was Tattletale. It fit with her nature. And then it explains that she's also safe for doing it. But after, she gets the grenade off, then apparently she signals Rachel to do something. Perhaps something as reckless as a grenade. Vale says, Tattletale's never reckless. What kind of analysis is that? She's calm, reasoned, and correct. Good point. I should have thought of that before I spoke. So back in the dream, we get this good line on either side of the thing. Bugs, there was something I thought I should know, something that eluded me, like the water that escaped the ever-thirsty Tantalus. That's right. Taylor is like Tantalus, but for bugs. Whenever I went to drink from the pile of bugs, it would recede away from me. Anyway, Vale says, yes, in the future we will refer to Tattletale as non-wrong as often as possible. That will be more accurate. By the way, Vale, if you're going to have an art appreciation moment, now is as appropriate as Taylor is still in the dream, because this feels like it's supposed to represent the very first portion of the dream. Anyway, though, she gets battered around enough, and like she keeps hearing the tolling of the school bell, and it's keeping her in like a loop. And then the scene shifts, and like when she finally fully gives up, then the scene like lets up and it shifts away from that, which I think is interesting. And then because it's like whenever it fully defeats her, and so she is now in a different scene, and instead of the tolling of the bell, she hears the sharpening of Mannequin's blades. It's like a completely fictionalized version of, like, obviously the whole book is fiction, but within her like reality, it is an entirely fabricated version of the scene. Where Mannequin has a different format. He's got 4 like bladed arms instead of the 2 arms he had, and instead of being an empty warehouse with a few crates and stuff, it's like a weird ominous factory with churning machinery, and there's stuff going. I think this part of the dream is particularly good. And then so yeah, it's sort of shifting. And then we go back into real life as she tries to fight Mannequin. And it's sort of in the structure of it when it switches back and forth between what she's sensing in the real world versus the dream. She'll like be it feels like whenever she comes back to the dream, she has like a bit more like fight in her for a little bit. Like the fact that she can draw on the real world in a way that like other characters who don't have super powerful thinker powers wouldn't be able to. It seems like that helps her not exactly ground herself, but like keep from giving up entirely. I don't know. But anyway, so Tattletale is there, and Noelle is trying to like tongue grab her in with a ranged tongue attack, but Tattletale has handcuffed herself. That's gotta feel great, to be dragged by a tongue and to only be held back by a handcuffed hand. It doesn't hurt at all. And then she uses her gun to shoot the giant tongue, like it's Star Wars 6, and they're getting pulled into the Sarlacc pit. And so, let's see here. Yeah, so what she had signaled for before is for Bitch to send in the 3 dogs, and they like jump in and they slam into Noelle, and they're huge like she is. And then Noelle just almost immediately begins enveloping them. And then the effect that Noelle's body has when she captures someone, where they lose like strength, which they sort of explain is due to like her replicating bacteria and other similar stuff, like microscopic organisms to weaken people, without killing them, because she wants to keep them alive inside of her to keep making more clones as like a resource. So it's like really specifically designed by the power, I would guess. But that stops the dogs, and then some clones jump out, and the Regent clone nearly kills Tattletale in one hit, almost has her shoot herself in the face with her own gun, but she drops it as an incidental action. And then, this is when she sort of goes back into her dreamscape, and then she's trying to fight Mannequin. It's a whole thing. She fails pretty badly, and then Mannequin sort of crushes her to death, and then in this death, the scene changes and goes to yet another scene. It also says, "My life flashed before my eyes, every event, every moment, and recalled feeling distilled into a single point." And that's when she sort of respawns within this horrible dreamscape. And this time she's in sort of a facsimile of the outdoor battlefield with the Slaughterhouse 9. There's exploded buildings and bodies and flooded streets, etc. But this time, the Slaughterhouse 9 have gang tagged everything with graffiti. She, in the dream, is weakened by a similar state that is happening to her real body, where she hardly has the strength to move around. And then multiple voices start coming in, and she hears it's Bakuda and Bonesaw and Jack are all there. And it says here, "My costume was more tatters than actual fabric. It wasn't like there were spiders anymore, only cockroaches." And I just feel like the costume we've seen throughout the story, whenever her costume is like well put together, it's like a representation of how well she's doing, and like it'll get damaged and reforged with different parts and stuff. And here, just saying that it's more tatters than actual fabric, I think it's a good shorthand. Sets the mood, even if you don't really like fully catch that it's trying to do that. And then the idea that Bakuda had borrowed technology from Bonesaw, when like every time we see a tinker borrow something from another tinker, it's worse news than previously for Taylor. Like Bonesaw borrowed from Mannequin for the bad thing she did to Gru. Bakuda specifically calls out borrowing from Vista for the bad thing she was going to do to Gru. I'm sensing a theme here. Back in the real world, Noelle has created, several clones. She specifically grabs the regent that was there and orders him to go and basically sends him off to break Shatterbird out of his cell, and he kind of reluctantly does that. And Tattletale's trying to fight the various Skitters and Grus there, and then she's got Bitch, Bentley, and Bastard actively fighting on her side against clones and stuff. The Skitters are working together. They're really good at being murder capes. Skitters are particularly adept at that, so Gru's being super pragmatic and trying to use his power for like defensive utility, because now there's one who can teleport people that his darkness sort of rolls over, and then like where the darkness ends up, it will let them out either at the end of it or part way. So that's a pretty cool power. It almost makes me wish that's what Gru's power always did. The Skitters accuse Tattletale of being a bad friend and hurt her feelings. And let's see here. Boop, boop, boop. Skitter 1 and Skitter 2 have different demeanors, which I think is at least interesting enough to call out. Where were we? So, yeah, they're kind of fighting. Skitters fighting, or evil Skitters are fighting dogs, and then Gru saves an evil Skitter that Tattletale was about to shoot in the face. She had already been shot and was like twisted up like a bug, still using bugs, but she didn't get finished off because Gru saved her. And then let's see here. Miss Militia shows up with some other heroes. But it's kind of bad timing, actually, because right as they show up, Shatterbird also shows up, who has killed the Regent clone and on her own volition just uses her power to blast people. They had just opened the door when the blast happens, so it really it gets everybody, and anybody with like a crunchable costume got crunched. Back in the dream, Skitter tries to make swarm clones. It doesn't work. Tries to run away. It doesn't work. Then, as the Slaughterhouse-9 have surrounded her, everything seems lost. But then, Weld, whose name is italicized, interesting stuff, that the italicized real world is pulling her, it's going into this non-italicized dream, and he's seizing her by the wrists and pulling her to safety. She's trying to get him to run because she's secretly a hero on the inside, and she's worried about him. But then she gets pulled out of Noel into the real world. He's got to do this quick, so he just sort of is like being really, really rough, but she like almost pukes because of like getting her stomach hit and stuff. It's a whole thing. And then she's worried that this is another layer to the dream, and then realizes that she's blind again. In the dream, she had regained her sight so that she could see all the bad things happen. But now she's re-blinded, unfortunate for her. And then confusingly, Shatterbird was in the dream and also in the real world, so it's that sort of trips her up for a moment, I think. But then she can't control her bugs very well because there's these two alternate Skitters who are each seemingly fairly powerful. Like, their pull is able to override her pull whenever they direct a command. And, there's two of them, so they can press the keys faster. They have higher APM. What's better than one Skitter? Two Skitter. And then so the bugs are really hurting some of the teammates, although Imp, in a costume related like metaphor thing, I don't know if metaphor is the right word. That's always my go-to for when a thing is another thing. But the clothes here for Imp, she pulls her spider silk hood over the scarf and it covers the back of her head and it's all tight. And it's not a perfect seal, but she's less hurt than anyone else by the bugs. And I would say Imp is the character who is the most, like, she's the cape who's the most influenced by Skitter herself. Like, the other capes kind of have their own thing as a cape and stuff, and Aisha is very much her own person, but she has gained a lot and learned a lot from Skitter specifically. And like her switching to the spider silk costume that is more all-consuming than the others, I think it's like a good metaphor for that. I didn't talk about it at the time, but even like if you think about like Alex's version of that costume, it's like his is hidden under other layers. It's like he has also been impacted by her, but it's more subtle and he hides it. Rachel and Brian, I think, are more their own like people in a way that their costumes are less all covering, but they're still given like some armor from it. I don't know. I think it works on a lot of levels, and so yes, Imp is the least affected by the bugs. And then they're also doing all of Taylor's tricks, like trying to tie people up with threads and all that crap. And then, you know, the wards are very injured by the Shatterbird Blast, you know, because it had kind of been focused that direction in general. And then Skitter, as she regains her senses, as she gets less and less sick, I think she puked out like a big lump of stuff too, which fucking gross. As if Noelle wasn't gross enough on the previous merits. Um. But anyway. Boo, 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 boo. What was I saying? Yeah, Skitter's getting things back together, and she's like consciously trying to keep the swarm from attacking her friends, and that's what she's focused on. She can't really use it to attack other people, but she's holding it at bay. And then Imp kills off one of the enemy Skitters. Imp is the one who had yeah, Imp murders a Skitter. They sort of keep moving down. The Skitters tell just before that happens, the Skitters tell Weld all sorts of things, all these stuff that she did. Then the fact that they the specific last thing it says before Imp kills it is, "You don't care? She murdered your boss, shot Thomas Calvert in cold blood, not that long ago." And then we get a whoopsie from Imp. And then so, you know, there's continued fighting. Miss Militia starts shooting clones like crazy. She's using like twin machine guns. She's mad that she's mad that they fed her dogs, but when like the Rachel dogs, but when the clones get spit out, they're normal dog size, and this also surprises her. Which I find funny. This is where Skitter hears Echidna for the first time, because she, you know, didn't hear the full conversation with Eidolon before. She could only hear, you know, kind of a chopped up mess of it through the bug senses. But yeah, Rachel has her other dogs plus Weld fight to get the small dogs, the normal sized ones, out of the big dog cocoons, which they have increased Noelle's size, but they got several important figures out. Tattletale was especially worried about what weird variations might come off of Gru's power. They don't ever say it explicitly, but like his power seems like it could come out really versatile, and it's like an area of effect power, and we know he's got like kind of trump qualities where he can interact with other powers. It could just who knows what bad things may lay in wait for them, but that's why it was worth it to increase Noelle's size and strength, to slow her down for now, buy them time, and get them some people back. And, you know, it also stops the enemy side from having Grace, pretty good fighter, and Tecton, who, like, if you leave them alone with a Tinker, could maybe get multiplicative. You know, it get bad. So, the fighting gets really, really brutal. Miss Militia's like flamethrowering clones, and like Weld lops off a section of Noelle at one point, and then like there's so much Noelle puke on the ground and like just other stuff that Weld just like he curling shuffles yeah, you know, bodies of Tecton and I think Gru. Let me see here. Who is it? It's Tecton. Oh yeah, it's Weld forced another dog free, and Echidna moved one leg to step on it. Grace and Tecton fell, and Weld dropped after them. He turned the blade of one of his hands into a scythe, then chopped a segment of Echidna's foot free. With one motion of the scythe, he sent Tecton, Regent, and some of the dogs skidding our way, sliding them on the vomit slick floor like a hockey player might with a puck on the ice. Yeah, it's pretty grody. But these chapters are nothing if not that. And then so Echidna like drops herself on Weld to try and stop his progress. To which Miss Militia rocket launchers her, which is pretty sweet. And then Weld busts out of there, and he's got Grace and another dog. Then we sort of skip some more fighting. This is when they're doing the fighting retreat, when she's willing to like full flamethrower stuff. Clock Blocker and Kid Win got shreked by the Shatterbird thing from earlier, and they're being like medevaced out on stretchers, and so yeah, Echidna's trying to escape. She keeps spitting out bugs and rats and stuff, and then stuff's crumpling around her because she's so big. When she does stuff, it just like creates damage. And she is now too big to fit out of the tunnels that they had used to get in full-size trucks. So it's like a whole thing. And, you know, it's all shaken like it's Majora's Mask in there every time she moves about. So, and then Weld says that Vista wasn't in there. And then Vista must be somewhere else in the building. It's like unclear during the events of this, but I don't think it's terrible spoilers to just say that like Vista has been sort of contained by Noelle elsewhere, but she's not dead. Let's see. They're not sure what's going to happen with Shatterbird. They're worried about that. Tattletale says the heroes are like, we brought in the containment foam, like you said, and she's all like, okay, fire it down when the dust settles. And they're like, the dust settles? And then she's like, I'm gonna do a cell phone bomb. And then she tries to call in the bomb that is the self-destruct on the base. But Miss Militia stops her at first. Miss Militia decides that she is going to take on the consequences of setting off the bomb. If she's going to allow it and say it's okay, she's going to press the button herself, because to her it's the same thing, but she's literalizing the sameness of the thing. She's saying, if it's like I'm pressing the button, I'm gonna press the button myself. Which I think is great. It's she's literalizing her responsibility, and that she believes that actions have consequences, and that going with the flow isn't really an excuse, and that you'll still have to own up to the things you do if you do that. Miss Militia, it's almost like you're a grown-up and everyone else is a teenager. Looking way back to when I prompted the art comment, Vale says, I love the art always. This is fantastic. I feel awkward a bit saying it every time though is all. Yeah, no worries. I like that it's 2 layered images. If I go over to it, I will show you guys. To peek behind the curtain, there's also this marked Skitter, and this marked Taylor. So you can sort of see the transition between the two. And then the real image of them superimposed together. And she's feeling like the ghostly echo of her Taylor persona above her Skitter persona. And then 2 + 4 × 5 had said, one night I had a dream about if Skitter could control rodents instead of bugs. And I was like, beavers, capybaras, oh my god, this is OP. A whole army of capybaras. The problem is that, like, while she views the bugs as disposable and she gets away with that morally, I think a lot more people would be like, oh my god, Skitter led all those sweet capybaras to their deaths. Vale says, it captures the feeling of dream state and identity crisis. It's so well done. Yep. So anyway, back to 19.1. So they're outside the building, and they do indeed use the self-destruct. Taylor's surprised that Coyle didn't use this on them. This is a big enough of a blast that it's like an explosion and a controlled demolition, and it shocks Regent into saying, probably in a... He's trying to do a callback to The Wire. He goes, "Shit." You know Regent loves TV, so that's definitely what's happening. But because it's the world of Worm and it's Earth Bet, then it's a slightly different actor who played the same character. Let's see here. So, Tattletale had almost set off this booby trap bomb in the past, but managed to not do so when she was snooping and stealing. You know how she snoops and steals. And then Tattletale had really wanted a secret base, but was willing to destroy this. And then Miss Militia starts blasting all the wreckage with containment foam, filling in all the gaps. Which should help her from slurping her way out. Tattletale confirms she's definitely not dead, and that this might buy them the time they need to upgrade this to a Class S threat and get some reinforcements. Gru points out importantly that she is stronger now, but they had to hold her in place for the bomb. And then they don't really have any ideas right now. Regent totally gets some burns on Tattletale for being too impatient, not wanting to have to wait for a new secret lair. And then Skitter remembers that being inside Noelle makes you have crazy, altered dream trigger vision things. And so she turns to Gru, since his second trigger event was really bad, of course. The scene we all saw in Arc 13. And he is unspeaking because he it was a very bad experience for him. It was like what Taylor's was, but clearly much worse. Because the experiences he's had have been worse. So she tries to search for medical attention, but decides that she needs to take a moment to address Weld and Miss Militia and talk to them about what the clone had said, because it seems like Weld is telling Miss Militia about the killed Thomas Calvert thing. So that's the end of 19.1, and Skitter diverts for now from helping Gru, but she will circle back. So final chapter thoughts. It's a really good one. I'll talk more about the dream and stuff later, and I just I think the way that it is done is really creative, and I think it's impressive how this section feels like an outline for stuff that will happen as late as like the end of Ward, where like the powers will create like not a memory and not always a dream, but kind of like these like something in between kind of things, and the like logic behind them feels really consistent, and like the amount of detail on different things feels really consistent in like this one, as well as again stuff that happens really late game in Ward, and it's it's just impressive because I don't know, it feels like it tells you so much with the structure of the dream without having to just directly tell you any of it. And, you know, you could just like miss plenty of it, but that's fine. It's not trying to like beat you over the head with this information. It's just, I just think it's really impressive as all. Anyway, I'll move on to 19.2. Oh, I missed some Veil commentary. What if the rodents were small, could fly, and lived in a hive and could sting you? That would be even more OP. Yeah. What if there were lots of them? How many capybaras can you fit in a cubic meter? These are the kinds of questions we need to ask ourselves. Vale says yes, like a swarm. Something like that. So 19.2 starts with Skitter thinking how she wants to tend after Gru, but it's really important she clears up this thing as soon as possible and stops like information spread. So she peels off and talks to Miss Militia and Weld. They don't like need to go somewhere private because when she approaches, heroes are like they just naturally avoid her. They kind of turn away from her and move away, which I mean, maybe it's because she's an evil bug villain. Maybe it's because she's covered in puke and smells terrible. Who could say? As the ads would tell you, porque no las dos. So she's able to talk to them, and she's keeping her voice down, and she thanks Weld and stuff. She says that it was pretty damn heroic. Apparently, Imp indeed was the one who got in touch with the message from Tattletale, and then Skitter pretends to be fine. She gives a nod to the "you're okay," even though she can barely stand up. And then apparently Imp had said it would be catastrophic if there was a bunch of clones with the bug power zorping around. Or, you know, the controls rat's power, what have you. And let's see here. They mention expecting that one of the Grus survived. No one had eyes on the teleporting Gru specifically, so they're like, that could be a big deal. And they were right. So Miss Militia says, like, wow, this was a little eye-opening on how bad some parahumans could get if they switched from good to bad. She sort of compliments Taylor's power without complimenting it. But Taylor doesn't pick up on that. Miss Militia says they're playing fast and loose with the rules because they took off the armbands, which I think is a bit silly because let's be real, the clones come out naked and like are not wearing ultra specialized costumes that only the given cape has. You know, I don't know. It's kind of a silly complaint. And then Weld is surprised she was conscious inside the thing. So they didn't really pick up on the idea that she'd be coming over to talk about what the Skitters had said. But Skitter she has like one of those character building moments, like internal monologue style that she has very often, but that were the most common at the very beginning of the story when she would sort of think out her worldview when most of her time was spent alone and thinking, where she says that the kind of miscommunications that happen on rom-coms or sitcoms always drove her crazy, so she could never stand those things. And she specifically is trying to avoid the kind of bad outcomes that come from not sharing information. But she also can't really be truthful. So while she thinks about how simple this should all be, when she attempts to deal with one of these situations, she like immediately realizes, oh, it's actually not that simple to just say the hard truth. So she doesn't say the hard truth. She talks around the fact that she killed Thomas Calvert, even though she's like, I killed someone who has two names that both have two syllables, starts with a T, second word starts with a C, not saying who, could have been anyone. Also, I didn't kill anyone. That was someone else. So it's like the most, I'll never say that I did it. It's really stupid. But she does semantically indeed never actually say that she did it. So she does a lot of twisting and turning in this conversation, and it doesn't go nearly as easily as she wants it to. And then they kind of don't want to believe her, and she's like, if I was gonna make an excuse, wouldn't I tell you something more believable? And it's like, no, you'd tell me something so bananas that not only would I say, like, oh, of course you'd have made up something simpler, but I also can't check all the details until later. And she's like, all right, well, I guess you don't have to believe me. I'm just trying to give you as much information as you can get. And then she brings up Cauldron. Miss Militia's like, Cauldron's not real. And she's like, if Cauldron's not real, how do you explain the Case 53s? And Weld's like, hashtag good point. And then, she brings up that she's seen, like, so much stuff that leads her to believe Cauldron's real. Miss Militia's like, did you actually see them get the powers? And she admits that no, she didn't see them drink it and get the powers. But we know that the circumstances around her not seeing the powers drink had a lot more to do with another team suddenly attacking. There was no obfuscation on the part of, like, Skidmark or whatever. But, they kind of move along past that because of how conversations work. So they're moving down the conversation, and then they're like, Miss Militia says, it's only selfishness that's bringing you here. You're only telling us stuff that will, like, partially exonerate you or cast doubt. And Skitter's like, fine, if you think it's self-serving, like, whatever. But if I wanted to just build up power, I would have kept Dinah, etc. And she sort of lays down some hard truths to the heroes about how she's been fighting whoever was going to hurt her territory and her people the whole time. And then they sort of keep moving on. Miss Militia still thinks she's making excuses by not admitting to things. And then, yeah, they kind of there's a continued back and forth. There's obvious value to what they're saying, and it brings nuance to the conversation. But for the sake of this little recap, we will not go over all those details. Tattletale shows up to cut off the conversation before any more is said, and takes Skitter away to talk to them. Miss Militia does say that if Skitter's telling her the truth about all this, she does appreciate it. She feels like she's having to step out of her comfort zone to demand proof like this, but she can't let things slip, and she can't just take things at face value now that everyone's relying on her. And then Skitter says something that I mean, it's almost like if Lisa could have asked her to say anything in this moment, this is the sentence. She says, "Being in charge is hard." And then Tattletale does the thing where she falls behind Skitter to seem like, Skitter's the boss, etc. And then, Skitter thinks through the implications of this and the fact that people think Tattletale's scary in her own right, so the fact that she is being deferent to Skitter is an even bigger show of things than normal, or whatever. It's like a compound show. And then they meet up with Scapegoat. We all love Scapegoat, and Scapegoat and I have the same first name, so I got a terrible character. Wish I got somebody better. The power is very interesting. I would never want to have it. Terrible power to have. The estimation that Skitter has of him is that he is a teenage hero, probably a ward, and he's got a big robe on, and he's also got a hidden layer of armor below. And Scapegoat says that he's not a healer, but he's going to fix her, kind of. His power can take away her wounds and stuff, but he keeps saying it's a delicate balance and stuff. And they don't clarify in this moment, but we'll like learn more over time about what his power does. But he starts working on her, and she feels all these terrible sensations of like switching to all like kinds of heat and all different like textures on her skin, all over her body, and like constant changes and mismatches. And he's kind of dimensional shifting all the individual parts of her body to try and find parallel versions of herself to distribute this damage over and like move in healed versions. It's great. What a great power. So moving on, that's happening, and he sort of Tattletale's saying that they're swapping the bod parts. She's gonna be safe, but the problem is that and she has to stay calm, because if she's all agitated while he's doing this, then the effect is weaker, which again, it has just so many conditions piled upon each other. It's what a great power. She does her bug meditation where she becomes the swarm, and so that's how she's able to in a way she's centering herself, but she's able to decenter herself, really. And then Tattletale is like, you can't get hurt or all your injuries are going to come back and like a rubber band effect, maybe even hit you harder. Skitter doesn't know how she's going to fight around that. She's like, what do I even do? And for a second, she's like saying, maybe I should just keep the injuries so I can fight at full force, which is like a bananas thing to say. Like, let's be real, Taylor. You can hardly walk around at this point. If you weren't you wouldn't even be standing. Scapegoat thinks she's ungrateful and for a moment offers to stop, but then they continue having a conversation until it's too late. And then right as that happens, Skitter's brain says, all at once, the sensation stopped. My entire body seemed to vibrate like a silent tuning fork might. In the absence of the sensations, my ears were ringing, and spots swelled behind my eyelids. I opened my eyes, and I still couldn't see. I'm going to ... this. I want to get to the point where she says, I could see and I could breathe. And then, where's the bit? She thinks about... I felt better, though. Enough that I felt almost euphoric. Aches and pains I'd stopped paying attention to long ago were gone. It did a lot to help me dissociate from the images and scenes I'd seen inside Noelle. So I thought that was pretty cool. Also, they don't mention it here, but Scapegoat can take away things that are not like physical attributes. Like, he can transfer tiredness onto himself, for instance, or like stress. And I guess those are in some way physicalized attributes in your body, but it's like, it's not just limited to like a cut. It can be complicated things. So yeah, that happens, and then she wipes off her goggles and she can see. Like, because she had not been able to see anyway, she didn't realize there was just like puke and blood and everything on her mask, so it was just opaque. And then we get one of those most classic moments of the book. She's fucking blind, Scapegoat yelped. I think we all love that moment. And then she sees that Scapegoat's costume was like a white and gold thing, and he has like a goat head. Could have sworn I mentioned it, Tattletale said. It's great. And this is when we realize that he takes on the injuries that are taken away. When he does the blending of the other versions of Skitter. And then we get, how the fuck am I supposed to operate like this? And then basically Tattletale says, like, look, we're gonna just pull the injuries off all my other teammates, and then once we've done that, then we're gonna use the offensive side of your power, which I mean, I guess spoilers for the next chapter. It's like he can in turn put all the injuries and all the negative effects and things onto people. I think he could even transfer, like, just as like a deleterious effect to himself, could probably transfer positive conditions onto people. I'm not sure, but I feel like that's an application of his power that they just don't explore. Neville had said, probably in response to his own thing of yes, like a swarm, said, and with a queen. And then a more recent comment that dragged my eyes just a moment ago was, it's one of the best. I'm imagining you're saying that about Scapegoat's power. Or no, about the moment of the she's fucking blind. Yeah, classic moment. It is one of the best comedy moments in the whole book. But Scapegoat is obviously being paid off by Tattletale. Skitter thinks, a corrupt hero or just an enterprising one? And I would say probably he is like trying to get cash on the side, and then, the kind of guy who's more corruptible anyway. He has kind of a shifting identity in a way because of his power, I think. Let's see. Skitter gets worried about Tattletale's wallet because of all these capes she's buying and mercenary work, like this scapegoat, very short mercenary work for the healing. And then seeing with her own eyes for the first time, Grace and Wanton. Grace is like, is there a problem? And then Scapegoat, of course, is saying he hates his power, which they're used to hearing. And then realizing that Scapegoat is blind, Grace says, "You're blind?" "I was. It happened after we parted ways?" "No." It's like one of those classic Skitter moments where she's just building the Skitter legend one moment at a time. Let's see here. Skitter asks Grace if she had lasting effects from Noelle, and she says that she didn't. Vale says it's a perfect scene done perfectly. Yeah. Grace says she's fine, but Skitter thinks she's maybe lying. She thinks about the fact that they're both covered in puke, but that her costume doesn't show it very much, so she probably just smells bad. She doesn't say the smells bad thing, but goddamn, it's probably true. But she feels so good. This is the part where she says she felt almost euphoric. And I mean, this is taking away. This is healing permanent injuries, like the shoulder thing that she's just been dealing with. Like the difference between before the healing and after is it's quite stark. Anyway, and then she admits to herself that Tattletale was right, and this is actually worth it. And whatever they can do to keep this healing, they should. She had just sort of convinced herself that she was fine with the situation as it was. She wants to find the others to help Gru, and then they don't want to put Wanton on a dog's back or Skitter, because that will probably shake the effect too much, and it could like, bump the injuries back onto them. And then they kind of go through a little bit of back and forth, and Tattletale's like, it's really important that you take this seriously. And then she doesn't touch Scapegoat. Grace and let's see here. Grace and Tattletale work together to move Scapegoat, and he's just sort of, because he's blind and stuff, he's like puttering his feet under himself a little bit, I would guess, but not doing too much else. It probably really hurts to be Taylor, to take on the workload that she had been carrying. Taylor realizes she's super hungry, and she counts about 80 heroes here, a bunch of big names. She thinks they must have made it an S-class because of what's going on. She's thankful that she doesn't have a cape here, because she feels like after she sees Eidolon's cape, like, wow, what if I looked like a cape noob in the cape community? That would be ironic. And then Bender's like, that's not irony. And then she notes that there aren't many villains here. It's pretty much only the like undersiders, and then when they go off, that she'll realize that the travelers are here too. I don't know if she's already sensed them. She doesn't mention sensing them, but I think they're close enough that she could. She meets back up with her group. She makes it a private conversation. She keeps Grace, Wanton, and Scapegoat from them. When Wanton tries to walk through the bugs, then she crawls some bugs into his nose, ears, and mouth. Great. Making lots of friends. And when he moves away, then she doesn't, she removes them immediately, but still grotesque. And then, she asks what's going on. Gru can't answer, and Imp, says that he's doing real bad, and Skitter tells them that being inside the Echidna, you see bad moments from your life or variations on your trigger event, and then Imp goes, oh, and then they sort of observe Gru's darkness being even more negative emotion-y than normal. It's not described in any way as roiling as it does when he's mad or anything. It's very well, I'm gonna read the quote. He was staring off into space, with darkness gathered in thick ropes around him, to the point I couldn't make out how he was sitting. He did that instinctively, I'd noted. The more he withdrew into himself, suppressed his emotions, the more his darkness manifested around him. So there's this moment where it's a back and forth where Skitter tells Imp to take him home, and then when Imp tries to stay, when she says she can help, then Skitter basically says, like, if you don't take him home, I'm going to take him home. So one of us can stay and fight, and one of us can take him. So I think it should be you, but I'll take him if you think that you should stay here. And then Imp is like, well, you're not really giving me much of a choice here, pal. And then decides to take Gru. And so Gru leaves, so there's 4 Undersiders here. Regent and Rachel do not talk. Well, she says Rachel. Regent and Bitch do not talk in this part. They're silently letting the rest of the group handle this, but unlike other times when sort of they pretend to be staring off, they're like clearly focused and intent on this situation. And then Imp, yes, goes ahead and leaves. Skitter's thinking, well, she says you're the leader, and then takes Gru, but Taylor, she says, it's Skitter. Taylor, I need you to listen. So she says her own direct name. She's doxing herself like crazy. Hopefully her bugs buzzing will cover the sound. But she's trying to comfort him because she's thinking of her own dream self, and she thinks of like the specific types of things, like letting other people down. So she's like telling him that it's not his fault, and he actually was able to save people. And then he it seems like she has some kind of positive effect. I don't know. It's hard to tell. But he then leaves with Aisha. Yeah, so Alexandria, Legend, Mirrodin, Chevalier, and Eidolon are here. Chevalier and Mirrodin, yet two more capes reminding us, oh, one guy can directly tap parallel universes. Another guy can parallel incorporate things into objects. We've just seen someone parallel incorporate human bods for healing. Interesting stuff. I wonder if there are other dimensions and applications of things. Earth's Aleph and Bet, perhaps. So, yes, Regent and Bitch follow Skitter to Tattletale. Their team is united. They go to Tecton, Grace, and Wanton. And then it's sort of a chapter wrap up here. But given that it's the chapter wrap up, Tattletale's like, I've got to create a cliffhanger. This thing's wrapped up too nicely for a 0.2 chapter. And then she does an evil look on her face that reminds Skitter of Emma. Good signs when that happens. And then Tattletale says Cauldron, just loud enough for a bunch of heroes to hear her. They have different reactions and whatever, but Tattletale confirms that to Skitter that the Triumvirate all know, and then Skitter rightly thinks that that's more people on their list of enemies now. And then let's see here. All right. So, yeah, I mean, chapter over. Another great one for the books. Tattletale doing things that are not wrong and definitely not reckless either. She would never be wrong or reckless. Oh no, I missed where this was. Vale had said he seems to be a bit down. Oh, that must have been about Gru. Yes, only a bit, a tad. But yeah, a great chapter again. I love the writing in this section. We get a bit of a relief chapter after starting on an action chapter. Usually a 0.1 is like a lower stakes than this, but this 0.1 of this arc was quite heavy. So they're like, okay, we need a little bit of release before we start rising action again. And then there's still some tense conversations. I love the conversation between Weld, Miss Militia, and Taylor. The forcing of Aisha's hand to help Gru was great. Classic Skitter move. I like that Regent is still right back to like Meeman. It doesn't take him that long to recover compared to the others. He is the least affected by Noelle's horrible goop. I guess I'm just going to jump into the arc stuff. I think these two were a great way to open this because we obviously knew it was going to be a continuation of the last chapter, and like the last chapter ends on an opening action beat, kind of, or I mean the last Taylor chapters of the previous arc, and then the most recent chapter was that same action from Noelle's viewpoint. I don't know. I think this is just like a really, really great, like fast runway into this arc, and we're getting big events. We're gonna have a big like, conversational confrontation between the Triumvirate and Tattletale. We're gonna have like, everything setting up for the battle, all that's sort of coming in. And and then this arc is sort of hewing closer to the more traditional arcs where it's having fewer interludes, whereas we had talked before about how there's this whole run of arcs in a row that all have huge amounts of them, and this is just like the dying breaths of that. I'll talk more about the arc stuff later on the later chapter episodes. For characters, I'll sort of go through the heroes and the villains. There aren't actually that many characters compared to how it feels. At the very end, they'll like mention the other heroes, and I guess I'll just give a sub mention of all of the big 5 heroes who are mentioned. We don't see a Chevalier reaction or a Mirrodin reaction, but the fact that we see that all of the triumvirate are Cauldron, which we know, but Tattletale being able to confirm it relieves some dramatic irony of us knowing things that the characters don't know. And it's like another shoe dropping kind of thing, where like we knew this moment would happen eventually, probably. We knew that they'd probably know. And we don't even see a reaction from Mirrodin or Chevalier. So, with those characters out of the way, the most minorest of the heroes are Clockblocker and Kid Win. We don't even see them until after they have been Shatterbird hit and more or less one-hit KO'd. And so they get evac'd. Wanton does not do a lot. He turns into a telekinetic storm normally, but there's no situations for him to do that in these 2 chapters. So he just sort of gets bugs in his nose and his mouth. Great. Tecton gets puked out of a monster, and then hockey pucked on puke. Great. Grace, she got in some good one-liners. She got to be part of one of the great exchanges of the book where she's like, "You were blinded after we parted ways," and that one is almost as good as, of course, the Scapegoat moment. And I want to linger on Scapegoat a bit. He's a new character, and Skitter rightly interprets that he is like a corrupt hero who takes pay to do secret healing jobs on the side. And I mean, they could argue that like, oh, they needed to do this to win this Noelle fight. But the real reason he's doing it is not for some pragmatic battle reason. It's just for a pragmatic money reason. Hates his power. Has to injure himself to help other people. It's really weird. It's like the concept of like a sin eater, where they're like a person who takes on the negative aspects of other people's lives. Like, I don't know too much about it because I do not come from a culture that has sin eaters in it, but is a real world sort of religious concept, and his power reminds me of what I understand of it. So, Scapegoat is a really interesting character. We'll get to see him several more times in the next few chapters, so I will talk about him more then. Weld gets a lot of great moments. He is due to the nature of his power, has a unique advantage over Noelle, where the only things of hers that actually hurt him are the physical blows, which obviously she's still very strong, but the fact that he's an entirely metal person, it's pretty helpful. So he is dense and durable enough to take her physical hits. He can't be slurped. He can't be poisoned. Most of the clones she creates can't deal meaningful damage to him. He is like super capable and helpful in this fight. It's pretty awesome. But then Miss Militia. Oh, and Weld and Miss Militia get that great conversation. He's very savvy in the kind of conversation where he's like being a detective, basically, where he needs to keep a bunch of information straight. He's bad at the kind of conversation where he needs to comfort a friend. He's great at the kind of conversation where he needs to call you out on having been the cover for a kidnapping of a superpowered precog. And so he is extending the benefit of the doubt to Taylor again in a very like helps with this situation kind of attitude of like, I need to assume for sake of cohesion that the Skitters were lying to get under our skin and to turn us against each other. You're smart enough that if they have your brain capacity, then that is a potential thing. And then Skitter's like, let's just say maybe they weren't lying. Maybe I have done some things that I think are a little suspect. And they're like, you know, they get the little Metal Gear exclamation points above their heads. And, yeah. Miss Militia does great in that conversation, and she's clearly like she is, aside from Weld, the key player in it getting the other captured people out of Noelle, because she's like giving Weld openings, she's destroying clones, because she uses like the rocket launcher to break part of Noelle. She's like hammering everybody with machine gun fire. It's like a whole thing. She's like relentless and brutal in there. And she's still very savvy in this conversation up here. She did have like the worst timing of all when she opened that door just in time for all her teammates to get fragged by Chatterbird, but like, these things happen. You can't win them all because capes. Anyway, moving on from the heroes to our friends, the Undersiders. I'll start with Rachel because she's got the least going in these chapters. She risked a lot to save Taylor by throwing dogs in there, even if they had the plan to get the dogs out, and it did work. But it was still like a whole thing, and I'm very trusting of the plan that had been presented. So an impressive showing of camaraderie from our friend Rachel. Alec still gets some good quips in. He's roasting Tattletale. He's impressed by explosions. He's unfazed by Noelle making him feel bad. Lisa making big gambles. As always, you gots to. You gotta spend money to make money, she yells. And she means that literally and figuratively. We get a bunch of like classic Lisa moments where she's like showing deference to Taylor to like play up the idea that Taylor's the leader. It's like a whole thing. The stuff she's doing right now is super calculated. And we get that cauldron moment, which is like one of the most reckless Tattletale thing. Like, it's a minor thing in terms of like actual actions, but in terms of like ramifications and intentional like riling people up, it's like one of her most reckless things she's ever done, that we've seen. Moving on to Aisha. She wants to fight, and she also got that really almost really clutch kill on that Skitter. almost stopped her from spilling the beans about Thomas Calvert, but it wasn't quite fast enough. And she accepts that she needs to help Brian when it comes down to it. And then Brian, obviously doing bad, doing the worst out of the people who got zonked by Noelle. You know, now that I think about it, they should have used Scapegoat on Gru so that it would have pulled the negative aspects of the microorganisms away from him so that he could recover from the emotional trauma with having fewer physical symptoms. Maybe that happens off screen or something, but it just feels like they should have done that. Anyway, that aside, Brian, it's like a whole thing. He's clearly doing really bad. If Taylor imagined Bonesaw, Brian probably imagined like 5 bones. he imagined all the different variations. Bone C and Bonesaw were both there. It was a whole deal. They were on opposite ends of some sort of children's play structure. Who knows what you'd call that? Let's see here. Moving on to Taylor, though, because I don't actually have that much to say about Gru other than this was bad for him. Taylor's like she had a really low moment, but like the bounce back feels like she is almost like doing better than ever. The fact that she's physically healed from all these things that were like possibly going to be lifelong, from the blindness, from the shoulder thing, which I think would be a big deal that she's just been trying not to think about. Like, it's such a powerful turnaround. She's just like, I don't know if you've ever taken a ski boot off after skiing for a whole day, but I have to imagine her whole body feels like your feet feel when you take the ski boot off. So pretty cool. And you know, she's got ideas. She's ready to rumble. And Vale says she's put in perfect condition and luckily does not have to ever get injured again. Woo! Exactly. Yeah, I guess I don't have that much more to say about the characters. A lot of stuff happens and a lot is said. And Taylor's dream is somewhat illuminating. But it's kind of stuff that we would expect, not in a bad way, just like it's all so organic that I don't have that much to say about her feelings on the dream. Like it all just stems from a place that makes sense. And I am especially not going to talk about it right there because moving on to the powers, knowledge, and world building section, I wrote this whole thing. Taylor's initial dream inside of Noelle is made of more mundane aspects of her life and the bullying that she had faced before she had powers. The 3 key figures of her bullies have actual faces and identities. While the other students still hurt her, they are like faceless and indistinct. The school hallway that she's in isn't a very detailed environment and is almost like a blank void for her to be in that's just like vaguely related to the bullying. And after the power has longer connection to Taylor, like Noelle's power, it's able to make a new dream that uses capes that she's directly fought in scenarios she's been in to form like hopeless scenario after hopeless scenario. And each new experience and memory is sort of designed to keep her from fighting back. My guess is that this is also Noelle's power, the method that it uses to make the trigger events for the clones. And this might explain why the first clones of a person seem to come out with powers closest to the original, whereas later copies will have more and more divergent power sets. So I think that, again, a lot of this is me like inferring things, but if anything sounds especially wrong, just let me know in the chat. And then given that it's using dream logic to sort of form these scenarios and make things as bad as possible, it gives Taylor her sight back. She blinks and it has returned so that she can see a recreation of her fight with Mannequin in the warehouse. There are tons of new embellishments to the scene. There's ominous machinery that's like churning and pistons like going off and all that happening to cause sort of motion. Mannequin has a different body formation. He's got 4 arms that each end in a 3-foot blade, which is pretty different from the like grabby hands with the blades that thrust out of the palms. I guess it's not that different, but you know, it's an entirely new scenario, really. And then instead of just the victims who are there, it's all the people from her territory and all the important people, like Charlotte and Taylor, and her dad's there, and some of her teachers, and also the other Undersiders. Then it seems like Taylor is kept in a state where she kind of feels like she can fight back and has some agency, but then when she does fight back, things, she's not powerful enough and things get worse. Like in the first dream, when she stopped trying to fight back, she was still getting hurt, but less often. And when she completely gave up, it moved to the second scene, and it's kind of the same thing of she gains the confidence to attack Mannequin after seeing one of the visions of real life through the bugs, but then doing so is completely ineffective, and Mannequin like crunches in around her in a way that doesn't even sort of makes it physical sense, but again, dream. And this is after presumably killing Danny, but much like in real life where she didn't go to see Danny, she couldn't bring herself to look, so she actually has no idea if the hit struck home or anything. It's like a really interesting sequence of events that's like super illustrative of a lot of the aspects of Taylor, like putting her in a scenario where we don't have to have the real consequences of it, but we get to see what's happening. And it's like a weakened, like emotionally diminished version of Taylor in here as well. Where was I? So, so Mannequin crushes her in from all sides, and it's great matching in my opinion because his power is based off this weird neurotic need to be like closed or sealed away from the world. Which, having come into contact with him multiple times, maybe her power picked up on that, or who knows, but if it's just book imagery, if it's like meta imagery where like her power is giving insight to his power, like regardless, it's good either way. Vale says, I need to run for dinner in a few minutes. I'll catch the end when I get back. Take care. Bye. Anyway, where was I? So, having had even more time to connect to her and draw out memories, the newest scene has grown in complexity again, forming together an all-star lineup of Slaughterhouse-9. They've got Bakuda, because Bakuda formed a big impression on Taylor, not only in her like first near-death experience in a fight, but also that Taylor decided multiple times that she would intentionally put into practice things that Bakuda had lectured and monologued about. Then Jack and Bonesaw are quick to follow. They obviously left their marks with her, and so they're here. And they're like core set of the Slaughterhouse-9, which the memory is, like that's the main memory kernel here. Once again, Taylor's given some means to fight back, but it's very meager. It's like different cockroaches and stuff, and when she tries to form decoys, they're seen through right away. Just like her attack actions or her defensive actions didn't work in the previous scenarios. And then she's caught without trouble. When the 9 catch her, we see the all the members who made the cut, aside from the previous 3 mentioned. We get Siberian, Crawler, Shatterbird, and Burnscar from the real 9, and then rounding out the members, people she had big scary moments around. Knight and Amy, of all people, are there. Knight makes sense because that was another moment of almost getting killed, and then Skitter actually got her revenge in the fight in Arc 15 with Knight. And then Amy's a little surprising, but not that surprising, because when she first met Amy, well, even though they were on the same side in the Slaughterhouse 9 thing, when she first met Amy, they were like distinctly fighting each other, and not only that, but it could have formed a pretty big impression on the power, because like the feedback loop thing that Amy had done, it's like their powers were directly interacting between the 2 characters. And then she also probably had lingering doubts about Amy based on whatever Clockblocker had been alluding to in the van conversation. And she did see the sarcophagus cocoon Victoria. So, pretty ominous image, all things considered. I thought it was funny that Mannequin did not actually make the Slaughterhouse 9 cut. He did get his own scene, which is maybe more important, but it's just like, yeah, you're not really Slaughterhouse 9 material, Mannequin. And Fog also didn't make the cut, which, again, very funny. And then in the scene, when Weld reaches Taylor and starts to pull her out of Noelle, he's both in her real consciousness that can follow the fight, and because of her thinker brain, and he's in the dream where she sees him as being vulnerable to the attacks of the Slaughterhouse 9. The real and the dream sort of merge as he, I think I mentioned it while I was reading through the thing, but his grabbing of her is in the italicized text of the real world. And then after he drags her out, then she's no longer seeing the dream, and the normal text is the real world. It's like a great transition. I really like it. I think it's such a good touch. And there's no final page break that happens between her swapping back and forth between the worlds. All the other previous swaps and perspective had the page breaks. Anyway, I am sort of done talking about that aspect of things, but I thought that was all important, and that having considered this scene more, I will probably refer back to it when talking about things in the future. And then for Scapegoat's power, it's a great twist on healing powers. I feel like taking the damage that you're healing is an obvious drawback idea for healing ability, but beyond that, there are way more stipulations and like complications. It feels like a Nen ability from Hunter x Hunter, given all the conditional statements that have to be met to actually use it. And it's also a good example of a like yet another power dealing directly with like parallel universes and stuff. The fact that it's able to blend aspects of living people from different like Earths. So that's cool. It's really great. We will see the offensive side that was alluded to. And boy, I gotta tell you, it was like a feeling of relief for me when I was listening to the audiobook for this. Like the difference in like the worn down Taylor and the like healed Taylor, I was just like, I don't know how many of you seen Fairly Odd Parents, but it was very much when King Arthur was like, I can see, I can fight. It's the same feeling. And whether or not a dragon subsequently murders him, unimportant. But But yeah, I thought it was a big relief and a great moment for her to be healed. And I could imagine some people being like, it loses stakes because it did that. And it's more like it just resets things back a little, because using the power itself is a little morally dubious. Not only for the like idea of the corruption, which she wouldn't care about, but the like potential that she's harming other versions of herself in other universes. Like there's stuff like that. Uh but it's also like the fact that it's fragile, I think I'm not exactly sure what that is saying, but I just don't think that it is a clearing of tension, like in a negative way, a resetting of stakes or anything, or like um, her really getting off easy from previous stuff. Like, aside from anything else, she's still taken quite a lot of psychological damage from all the wounds she's accrued. She doesn't think about it too much, but she also didn't think about how bad she felt until that aspect was cleared, and she felt that tuning fork feeling. Anyway, um, I don't have that much more to say about Power's knowledge and world building. Oh, I guess one world building thing. We learned that Coil's hideout was rigged to explode, which is pretty cool. And and then it explodes, which is pretty cool. I don't have a bonus for this week, but moving into audience participation, we got that double answer from Vale. The question was, what is a super useful power that you would hate to have? And only the one double answer. I'll read this. I have two for the same trigger event. I think they are both pretty awful and cool and wormy. Hindsight, struggling to keep up with the academic demands of a prestigious college while on an athletic scholarship. It says in parentheses he is not a smart man. Found his world crumbling when his easy major was eliminated at the same time an industry destroyed his athletic future. An injury destroyed his athletic future. Overwhelmed by the loss of his identity, the crushing pressure to succeed, no way forward, and the unfairness of it all, hindsight triggered. And so for the first thing, it's Thinker 3-ish. Hindsight gains the ability to analyze situations in hindsight, seeing all the possible outcomes, choices, and hidden details that were missed, but only after the situation has happened, and is only extremely effective when the situation was a failure. He also had to have direct involvement in the situation, which leads to him being secretly added to very risky endeavors by the PRT to avoid tanking team morale, while still having the possibility to get value from losses. Thinker 5-ish, Hindsight, can create detailed visual snapshots of his surroundings with focused effort, storing them indefinitely. However, to access them, he must enter a hyper-focused review mode where his perception of time accelerates, allowing him to meticulously analyze these snapshots for hidden details. But the ability often leaves him exhausted as his relative time focusing takes energy. He has perfect knowledge of how to navigate these memories while in review mode, but he's no smarter than he was and has to study for relative hours to learn. Yeah, pretty good powers. I had one that I had wanted to base an original character around, and I thought it was a really cool power. It's not so bad of drawbacks that I wouldn't want it, but it's like a power granting ability where you kind of focus your emotions into somebody else, and it kind of siphons them from you to them, and then you have lost those emotions. They have been sort of amped up in that person. So if you gave them your anger, you'd have to be feeling it in the first place to use it and draw from it, but you would be left sort of hollow of that. and they would be left with the amount you had and whatever they had to begin with. And then they would have a power based around that kind of emotion. Like fear would give you mover powers, and like anger would give you like brute powers, stuff like that. But then it would leave the person who is like giving the powers, not only do they not have a power themselves, aside from power granting, but they also are sort of like emotionally pulled in different directions by having to spend things on different scenarios. So they're very emotionally unstable because of the power. So that was my idea of like a cool power with like reasonably heavy drawbacks. You don't get any things that are like as direct, like you have no personal power to use and you're entirely reliant on other people to use the powers you grant them. And they themselves are off kilter just to get the powers. So it's like a whole thing. Let me think. Are there any other powers with really bad drawbacks that I would like to think of? It would be funny if a person could make force fields, but they were really strong force fields, and they were invisible, and they didn't have like a sense to tell them where the force field was, so they kind of had to remember, so they could bonk their own force fields if they didn't keep good enough track. I think that would be really funny, and it would not be a great power to actually have, constantly bonking into stuff. Anyway, though, audience participation over. Let's see here. I am going to start up that old intro outro music and read off the links. Thanks to the people who were here in the chat. The usuals were here, and then thanks to Vale for those audience participation answers. For the next audience participation chapter, let me double check something. Oh, I shouldn't have started the music while I was trying to think. We're gonna redo. We're using a time rewind power that takes the song back by X many seconds. And false ending, you know. So the interlude. Oh yeah. Blasto. Which two parahuman powers would you combine with a Blasto hybrid? Let me type that into the chat. Which two parahumans would you combine if you were Blasto in this chapter? And then we do 19.x. Send that, and then type it into the doc. Okay. Well, sorry for that interrupted ending, but now we can do the real ending. As I thanked before, thank you all again. The music heard now is Queen Scourge by ScarlettXOX. Twitch.tv/Scarlett_Rogue. She usually streams once every other week, including tomorrow. A new series that she's been doing, Gas Station Blues. It's like a tabletop adventure with one of her friends. It is a single player, single GM kind of setup, following sort of investigative stuff. Our Discord server can be found in the channel description and stream description. The author of the work being discussed can be supported on Patreon at patreon.com/wildbow. The full text of the work is available for free online at parahumans.wordpress.com. There is also a free fan-made audiobook of the entire work at audioworm.rain-online.org. I will be back next week with another edition of this. We should be covering 19.3 and 19.x, unless something changes.